So Death Battle just recently dropped Simon the Digger versus Kyle Rayner, and they had Simon the Digger winning the fight, mainly based off of the fact of Simon's adaptation abilities and being able to fight beings who are on higher dimensional planes of existence than him and being able to adapt to that level and go even beyond that, which isn't a bad reason at all for him to win, especially since they had much worse reasoning for other matchups. My only problem with that reason is that I consider it a no limits fallacy, because at that point you can literally just argue that Simon can just adapt to any character and can just immediately one-shot them, which is obviously not true. So I wouldn't really use that argumentation for Simon. I would just go off of what he's shown and the scaling he has at the end of his series, which is 11th dimensional. But I will say that it is other argumentation that can possibly get him higher than that, which I will go over once I get to his part of the scaling. And some of you guys are probably wondering what's a no limits fallacy, so I'm gonna go over it real quick. In the fictional sense, a no limits fallacy is when a person has a feat, a statement, or hacks an ability that didn't really show limits within the series that they come from. So then when people talk about that specific character, hacks, ability, feats, or statements, they try to apply it to another character who has way better shown feats, hacks, abilities, and so on and so forth, and say, oh, this character can beat them. For example, Saitama and Gojo. For Gojo, people believe that Infinity is an end-all be-all ability that can pretty much stop any character within fiction, based off of the fact that they wouldn't be able to touch Gojo and he can just use Infinite Void and his brain dead him. And for Saitama, it's based off of the fact that he has infinite potential, boundless potential stated multiple times within the series and guidebooks, and they believe that means he has infinite power. So that means he can just one-shot anybody. And then he also used the name fallacy, saying, well, he's called the One Punch Man. The show's called One Punch Man, so he can just one punch anybody in fiction. That's what I mean when it comes to no limits fallacy for those two characters, for example. Now that I'm done with that little no limits fallacy side tangent, let's get back to topic. Now for Kyle's scaling, I'm pretty sure this is the first time that Death Battle ever went into pretty much hyperversal scaling for DC, which I don't really have a problem with, especially since I kind of agree with it, since DC do follow M theory, which does scale to 11 dimensional, making a multiverse high complex multiversal. And then for the realms that transcend the multiverse, like the God Sphere, Limbo, the Monosphere, and the Source Wall, and the fact that these realms transcend each other in that specific order, it makes the DC cosmology at least 15th dimensional, aka hyperversal. Now for Kyle Rayner, I'm going to break this into two parts, him with the Green Lantern ring and him with the White Lantern ring, to see where each version scales to cosmology wise within DC. Now for Green Lantern Kyle Rayner, he's pretty easily God Sphere level, since we literally see him be able to beat new gods pretty easily without any help, on top of the fact that he's stated to be a threat to Apocalypse, pretty comfortably putting him in that God Sphere level, which means base Kyle Rayner is in that hyperversal ranges of power, which is 12th dimensional exactly going off of my scaling. But if we were to go over the scan that they use in the video, which is 12.3 dimensional, then it would be 13.3 dimensional. But I really wouldn't use that, since it leans more towards the multiverse being 11 dimensional based off of the in theory scans being consistent within multiple different comics rather than it just being 12.3 dimensional. But now moving on to White Lantern Kyle Rayner, he's definitely Source Wall level, based off of the fact that he's one of the few characters within the DC verse to be able to completely bypass the Source Wall, on top of the fact of being able to create his own Source Walls with the White Lantern ring, which easily puts him at that Source Wall level of power, meaning that White Lantern Kyle Rayner is 15th dimensional, which is again hyperversal. Now with that being said, it should be pretty obvious that Kyle Rayner should be able to one-shot Simon pretty easily, White Lantern or not. But I will say that there is a scan that you could argue put Simon at 20th dimensional, but it's pretty iffy. But if you do believe that this scan is valid, this will obviously put him above Kyle Rayner, Green Lantern, White Lantern, it doesn't matter. But I'm pretty iffy on the validity of this scan and the translation, so I'm just gonna leave it here and let you guys come to your own conclusions if that scan is valid or not.